very flattering. Wait till I tell the missus.
What kind of movie shall we see?
Something short.
Released in September 1982, Cheers was once NBC's most risky gamble. A tiny bar in the heart of Boston, a few unfamiliar faces, and ordinary stories revolving around beer, love, and small failures. No one believed that from that pile of small talk could emerge a miracle in the golden age of American television. Yet, from the 77th position in the bottom of the 100 show ranking, Cheers turned the tables, rose to the throne of sitcoms, and became the soul of the 1980s. But behind the warm light of that bar counter were dark corners. The show almost got cancelled after the first season, had an episode about HIV permanently banned, and even a scandal where an actor was erased just for an offhand comment on live radio. Beneath the cheerful laughter and the foaming beer glasses lay a suffocating world of rivalry, wounds, and secrets never revealed. Let's step behind the curtain of Cheers to uncover the 20 strangest truths hidden beneath the counter, where laughter is only a thin mask covering the tragedy of a legend. 20. When Cheers was almost erased right from its first episodes. In September 1982, while America was filled with laughter-filled sitcoms and popular television blockbusters, NBC released a show that seemed to have no future. Cheers. No grand setting, no big stars, just a small bar deep in the basement of Boston, where a few anonymous patrons gathered to talk about alcohol, work, and trivial sorrows. Right from the first week, the show hit the bottom of the ratings, ranked 77th out of 100, almost a death sentence for any series of that time. In NBC's meeting rooms, people discussed pulling the plug. The producers stayed silent and the cast could only wait for the cancellation order. Yet amid that despair, Brandon Tartikoff, the young entertainment director of NBC, made an unconventional decision. He stood up, slammed his hand on the table and said, "Give them time. I believe the audience hasn't realized yet that they're watching something wonderful." No one expected that very sentence would save Cheers from an early death. Gradually, the first viewers began to connect, treating that bar as their second home. With every new season, the audience grew, until Cheers, once a disastrous failure, became one of America's most beloved sitcoms. The persistence of one man changed the entire history of television and opened an 11-year journey that could never be repeated. What would have happened if Brandon hadn't spoken up to defend Cheers? Leave your thoughts in the comments. 19. Two supporting roles that seemed meaningless became the heart of the bar. On the first day of casting, Cheers was only looking for two supporting actors to create atmosphere. George Wendt walked into the audition room, received a slip of paper with a single line of dialogue. "Beer." He read it naturally, without exaggeration, but the whole room burst into laughter because of how real it sounded. The role was handed to him immediately. Next, John Ratzenberger auditioned for the same character. When he heard the part had already been taken, he didn't leave, but instead asked a question that silenced everyone. What kind of New England bar doesn't have a know-it-all guy who argues about everything? That sentence made writers Glenn and Les Charles look at each other and burst out laughing. A new idea was born on the spot. They created the character Cliff Clavin, the mailman who fancied himself the encyclopedia of the bar. John was invited back to the set, and George became the bar god Norm Peterson, the man who walked into the familiar greeting "Norm" that America repeated for 10 years. From two minor roles meant only to fill space, Cliff and Norm became the soul of Cheers. They weren't handsome, they weren't famous, but they represented what millions of viewers found in that bar: familiarity, warmth, and the feeling of being called by one's own name after a long, exhausting day. 18. Sam Malone once belonged to another sport before making history. When Cheers was still on the drawing board, the central character Sam Malone was imagined as a former football player, strong, rugged, and the embodiment of real masculinity. The script was written specifically for Fred Dryer, a former NFL defensive star who once made stadiums roar every time he entered the field. The creators believed that image would attract male viewers, turning Cheers into a story about a fallen athlete rediscovering his faith beyond the spotlight. But then Ted Danson walked into the audition room. No muscles, no fierceness, only a dazed gaze and a half-drunken, half-sober smile. At that moment, the air in the room changed. He didn't look like a football player, yet he exuded a strange charm, confident yet fragile, as if that bartender carried a past full of cracks no one could see. The creators, Glenn and Les Charles, decided to take a risk. They rewrote the entire character, turning Sam into a former baseball player, a romantic, worldly figure with just enough depth for the man behind the bar. That seemingly small change became a defining turning point. Sam Malone in Cheers was no longer a muscular hero, but a man of quiet failure, pretending to be cheerful while carrying an unshakable loneliness. Ted Danson transformed him into the spirit of the entire series, the man who held everyone together, both the bar's owner and a symbol of the yearning to find oneself amid life's drift. And from that moment, Sam Malone became one of the most immortal names in American television. If Ted Danson had not appeared and taken on this role, who do you think would have been the right person? Leave the names you believe would fit in the comments below. 17. Two supporting roles that seemed meaningless became the heart of the bar. Les Charles, one of the two brothers who created Cheers, once worked in a small bar after graduating from college. Every night, a middle-aged man would walk in, hang his coat on a chair, smile wearily, and say, "Just one drink, Les." But he never stopped at one. Glass after glass, his laughter mingled with the clinking of mugs and the faint sound of old jazz records in the smoky air. Whenever the phone rang, Les would hear a woman's voice on the other end asking, "Is my husband there?" And the man, without turning around, would quietly say, "Tell her I'm not here." That story haunted Les for years. When he wrote Cheers, he placed that man into the character of Norm Peterson, the man who found peace in the bar more than in his own home. Norm was not a hero, nor did he have big dreams. But precisely because of that, he became the symbol of America's middle class. Ordinary people living simply, finding small joys after long, tiring workdays. And from an unknown patron of a real bar, Norm stepped straight into television, becoming a familiar face to the entire nation. 16. The never-seen wife of Norm was closer than you think. Throughout 11 seasons of Cheers, audiences constantly heard Norm complain about his wife, Vera, a woman everyone was curious about but never saw. Vera existed only through mentions, phone calls, and sometimes a shouted voice from the other end of the line. She became television's most famous invisible character of the 1980s. Few knew that Vera's voice actually belonged to Bernadette Burkett, the real-life wife of George Wendt, who played Norm. Bernadette was invited to the studio just to record a few lines for fun, but her sharp, witty and lively delivery impressed the producers so much that they kept her voice permanently. By season 3, she even appeared on screen as Cliff's girlfriend, creating a humorous paradox that later became known as the most legendary behind-the-scenes joke of Cheers. That story was both sweet and bitter. On screen, Norm avoided his wife. Off-screen, it was his wife who followed him from the recording booth. A small detail, yet one that perfectly reflected the spirit of Cheers, where every story, whether happy or sad, hides a subtle smile and a touch of irony from everyday life. What do you think about this strange detail of the show? Let's discuss it together in the comments. 15. The boldest script in sitcom history was buried forever. In 1988, Hollywood entered a crisis. The Writers Guild of America launched a large-scale strike, causing hundreds of scripts to be abandoned, including one Cheers episode that was never filmed soon and later became a legend. The script told that Sam Malone suddenly received news that his ex-girlfriend was HIV positive. In a time when America was still anxious, fearful, and full of prejudice about this disease, that idea was considered too risky. According to the remaining draft, Sam would have to face panic when he thought he might be infected, forcing him to look back at his entire past, his relationships, and his indulgent lifestyle. The episode was planned as a serious turning point, meant to reveal the dark side of a character known only through jokes. But when the strike broke out, NBC took the opportunity to completely discard this script, believing that the audience was not ready to laugh along with the fear of HIV. From then on, the episode disappeared from all archives, mentioned only with regret by a few members of the crew. If it had been broadcast, it might have changed American television's view of illness and sexuality. But instead of creating an impact, the buried episode remained forever in the dark, becoming the greatest mystery of Cheers. 14. A real-life joke caused a character to be punished brutally on screen. Jay Thomas, who played Eddie LeBec, the husband of waitress Carla, was once a supporting character beloved by the audience. A former hockey player, Eddie entered Carla's life like a gust of wind, romantic, funny, and somewhat eccentric. But one careless comment made him lose everything. In a radio interview in Los Angeles, Jay Thomas was asked what it was like to act with Rhea Perlman, the wife of star Danny DeVito. He laughed and blurted out a reckless joke. "Brutal, man! It's cruel having to kiss her every day." That sentence spread like an explosion. The next day, the rumour reached the production team. Rhea said nothing, but the writers understood the message. When the next season began filming, they wrote Eddie a cold ending. While performing on ice, he was run over by a Zamboni, a death both absurd and cruel. No funeral, no goodbye. Only a newspaper note read, "Eddie LeBec died in a rare accident." That death became the typical example of Hollywood karma, where one wrong sentence can bury an entire career. And Eddie LeBec, once a beloved supporting character, turned into a symbol of cold punishment on screen. 13. A special scene once watched by 80 million people then disappeared without a trace. On January 30th, 1983, millions of Americans eagerly awaited Super Bowl XVII. Right before the kickoff whistle, NBC suddenly aired a short clip only a few minutes long. Sam, Diane, Carla, Norm, and Cliff sat around the bar counter arguing about which team would win. The laughter was loud, the dialogue fast, and it ended with the line, "Don't bet, drink with us." That moment was seen by over 80 million people, the largest audience Cheers ever had. But after that night, the scene vanished without a trace. It was never rebroadcast, never appeared on any DVD, and even NBC's own archives could not find the original reel. Some believed the tape was lost during storage. Others thought it was erased to avoid copyright issues with the NFL. The clip became a lost relic among collectors. Loyal Cheers fans spent decades searching for it, but no one succeeded. A scene only a few minutes long, yet it became a fragment swallowed by television history, where every laugh echoed and faded away like the last breath of beer in the bar. Have you ever seen this scene? If you have, don't hesitate to share it in the comments below. 12. The most perfect hair on television turned out to be a stage secret. On screen, Sam Malone always appeared flawless. A white shirt, sleeves rolled up, sparkling eyes, and jet black hair without a flaw. That hair became almost a symbol, part of the image of the most charming man in Boston. But the truth was far from what the audience saw. Ted Danson had begun balding slightly before joining Cheers, and for over a decade, that hair was only a carefully crafted wig. He kept that secret so well that even his co-stars rarely saw him without it. Only in 1990, when he stepped on stage to receive the Emmy Award for Best Actor, did Ted suddenly appear with his real head of hair, sparse, simple, and with a relaxed smile. The entire hall erupted, and television viewers were astonished. From that moment, the press called him the man who dared to remove perfection on live television. And the story of Ted's wig was not only a fun behind-the-scenes secret, but also a symbol of the spirit of Cheers. No matter how much glamour is hidden, what makes the audience love it is still the real person behind the bar counter. 11. The great role of Frasier almost belonged to an Oscar-nominated star. When Cheers began searching for an actor to play psychiatrist Frasier Crane, Diane's new lover, they sent the script to John Lithgow. At that time, he was a true movie star, with 2 consecutive Oscar nominations for The World according to Garp and Terms of Endearment. With his talent and reputation, Lithgow seemed the perfect choice to give depth to the complicated love between Frasier and Diane. However, Lithgow refused without hesitation. He said that television was shallow water, and he did not want to step into a sitcom. That decision seemed reasonable, but opened up a great turning point. Kelsey Grammer was chosen instead. From an unknown theatre actor, Grammer turned Frasier into one of the most beloved characters in Cheers, an intellectual, arrogant, lonely, and deeply conflicted man. After Cheers ended, NBC immediately produced Frasier, elevating the character to the peak of fame. A role that John Lithgow once rejected became a television icon lasting 20 years, a brief refusal that changed the entire history of American sitcoms. 10. One face, 2 of the most powerful mothers in American television. In Cheers, the audience saw Frasier's mother only briefly in a few segments, but her voice and demeanour gave everyone chills. The actress playing her was Nancy Marchand, a veteran stage performer with cold, sharp eyes and a deep, raspy voice like a blade. Years later, she returned to the screen in another role, the mother of Tony Soprano in The Sopranos, one of the most frightening characters in television history. What was strange was that even though the 2 roles were over 10 years apart, Nancy carried the same aura: intelligent, cold, and powerful enough to make even the strongest men afraid. In Cheers, she symbolized Frasier's psychological wound, a man who could never escape his mother's shadow. In The Sopranos, she embodied the older generation, manipulating her son with guilt. Nancy Marchand didn't just play 2 roles, she connected 2 eras of television, from light-hearted sitcoms to modern mafia tragedy. Both of those troubled sons, Frasier and Tony, shared the same fear: the silent yet ruthless presence of a mother. 9. From an overlooked supporting role, one actor created an unbreakable 20-year record. When Kelsey Grammer first stepped onto the Cheers set in 1984, he was only signed for 3 episodes. The character of psychiatrist Frasier Crane appeared as a temporary detail, Diane's new lover to add more drama to Sam Malone. But as soon as Frasier opened his mouth, that deep voice, arrogant manner, and self-satisfied gaze immediately made the audience laugh. He was not the kind of character funny on purpose, but funny because of his own excessive seriousness. The public reaction was so strong that NBC was forced to change the entire plan. Frasier went from a supporting role to a permanent character, appearing throughout the rest of Cheers. When the series ended in 1993, the writers realised they could not let this character disappear. Thus, Frasier was born, a separate series about the psychiatrist leaving Boston and returning to Seattle, beginning a new life with his elderly father and younger brother. No one expected the show to last for 11 seasons, winning more than 30 Emmy Awards, turning Kelsey Grammer into one of the rare actors to portray the same character continuously for 20 years. From an overlooked supporting role, he wrote an unprecedented record in sitcom history, transforming Frasier Crane into a symbol of intellect, loneliness, and a proud yet deeply human ego. 8. The only Cheers star who never returned, and the shocking reason why. Throughout Frasier's 11-year run, nearly the entire Cheers cast reappeared at least once, except Kirstie Alley. She was the soul of Cheers' final seasons, playing Rebecca Howe, the sharp and ambitious bar manager. Yet, when Frasier became NBC's new hit, Kirstie remained completely absent. The reason wasn't money or scripts, but belief. A devout Scientologist, Kirstie Alley believed that joining a show centered on a psychiatrist, a symbol of the mental therapy her faith opposed, was against her principles. She declined every invitation, even when Kelsey Grammer personally called to persuade her. Her absence shocked the entertainment world. American media called it the religious rift in sitcom legend. For many fans, it was a great loss. Rebecca Howe had represented strong, funny women struggling with themselves. In Kirstie's silence, people realized that sometimes what separates an artist from a role isn't the script, but belief. 7. A staged wedding to fool the studio audience. When Shelley Long announced her departure from Cheers after season 5, the production faced a dilemma. Diane Chambers, her character, was half of the iconic romance with Sam Malone. If news of her exit leaked, the storyline would lose its surprise, and the live studio audience would surely spread the word. To keep it secret, the producers devised an unprecedented plan. They staged a fake wedding between Sam and Diane. The studio was decorated like a real ceremony, and the audience was invited to witness it. As the couple exchanged rings, cheers erupted. Everyone believed they'd gotten their dream ending. But when the episode aired, viewers nationwide were stunned the wedding was an illusion. Diane left Boston, and Sam stood alone in the empty bar, drinking by himself. That masterful deception was dubbed the perfect TV twist of the 1980s, proving Cheers didn't just create laughter. It could break hearts too. Did you fall for this brilliant trick? Let's discuss in the comments below. 6. When Cheers was remade in Spain and vanished after one season. Nearly 30 years after the original ended, in 2011, Spain's Antena 3 decided to revive the legend. They bought the rights, rebuilt the bar identical to Boston's, swapped beer for wine, and cast Alberto San Juan, a renowned stage actor, as the lead. The new version was heavily promoted, promising to bring Cheers' spirit back to Europe. But from the first episodes, Spanish viewers sensed something off. American comedy relied on fast-paced dialogue, bar culture, and New England's signature sarcasm, things impossible to replicate in Madrid's context. The situations felt forced, the dialogue lost rhythm, and the bar looked like a theatre stage. After 13 episodes, the network quietly cancelled the show. No farewell, no final broadcast. The Spanish Cheers vanished, leaving a bitter lesson. Some legends can't be copied, as their soul lies not in the setting or characters, but in an emotion that appears only once in history. 5. Ted Danson's decision forced an iconic series to end. In the spring of 1993, Cheers was still NBC's ace, holding a massive audience for over a decade. But at a sudden press conference, Ted Danson stood up, looked into the camera and said, "I think Sam Malone has told his whole story." That statement was like a thunderbolt. The crew was stunned. The network was rattled. A legendary series stood on the brink of ending because of one man's choice. NBC tried to salvage it. Writers proposed a new direction, having Woody Boyd, played by Woody Harrelson, take over the bar from Sam. Scripts were drafted, a new season planned. But Harrelson shook his head. He said bluntly, "Cheers is Ted Danson. Without Sam Malone, this bar has no meaning." That statement ended all hope. And so, after 11 years of making history, Cheers officially said goodbye. NBC announced the final episode's air date, an event broadcast live across America. As the screen faded to black, everyone knew an era had ended, all because one man chose to stop at the peak. 4. The farewell night, where the cast cried, hugged and got drunk for real. On May 20th, 1993, thousands gathered outside Boston's Bull and Finch pub, the real-life bar that inspired Cheers. Inside, NBC hosted a farewell party for the cast. On TV, the finale aired. Outside, fans shouted familiar lines. When the screen went dark, cheers mixed with music, while inside the bar, real tears fell. Ted Danson hugged Rhea Perlman and George Wendt. Shelley Long, who had left the show early, returned, quietly shaking hands with her co-stars. Beer flowed endlessly. Everyone laughed, cried, and drank. It was no longer a scene but a farewell ritual. No writer could script that moment where actors, after 11 years playing lonely souls finding joy in a bar, truly became inseparable friends. As dawn broke, Bull and Finch remained lit. Inside, the Cheers cast, exhausted, drunk but deeply moved, and sat together in silence. They knew that leaving this door meant the legend would close, and it closed in the truest way, in drunkenness, laughter, and final embraces. 3. The on-screen couple that made the studio believe they were in love off-screen. From the first episodes, the chemistry between Ted Danson and Shelley Long exceeded the writers' expectations. Sam Malone, the carefree former baseball player turned bartender, clashed with Diane Chambers, the romantic, intellectual, and argumentative woman. They were like fire and water, both drawn to and infuriating each other. That contrast created a rare chemistry, convincing audiences they were truly in love off-screen. Every scene between Sam and Diane was an emotional battle. Ted's burning gaze and Shelley's trembling voice teetered between anger and passion. Backstage, their tension sometimes spilled over to the crew. The director once said, "Every time they filmed a breakup scene, no one dared speak. Everyone believed they were really falling apart." That romance spanned multiple seasons, leaving one of the most romantic and haunting moments in American television. When Sam and Diane said their final goodbye in their last episode together, Ted and Shelley cried for real. Cheers was a sitcom, but amid the laughter there was a real love. Not between two people, but between art and genuine emotion. 2. The character meant to vanish became a television icon for 2 decades. Initially, Frasier Crane was created to fill the gap when Shelley Long left the show. A minor character, a talkative, annoying, slightly arrogant psychiatrist, was only meant to keep the story moving. But Kelsey Grammer gave Frasier a strange vitality. He didn't just deliver lines, he lived them, turning arrogance into humour and wisdom into loneliness. Audiences quickly fell for the character. In Frasier, they saw a scholar hiding his weaknesses, a soul needing to be heard but only knowing how to speak. When Cheers ended, NBC immediately expanded that world with Frasier, and the unthinkable happened. A minor character became a legend, winning dozens of Emmys and captivating audiences for 2 decades. Frasier proved that sometimes a character isn't born from writers' calculations, but from the living energy of the performer. That energy turned a psychiatrist briefly appearing in a Boston bar into a timeless television icon. 1. The most ordinary man in America became a generation's icon. Norm Peterson, the chubby, gentle man always sitting at the bar's corner with his familiar beer, became one of America's most beloved figures. Every time he entered, the crowd shouted in unison, "Norm!" A small but warm ritual, like a nation greeting a dear friend. George Wendt, who played Norm, was never a big star. Yet somehow, he made audiences see themselves in that image. An ordinary man, tired after work, just wanting a place to sit and feel he belonged. Norm had no ambitions, no victories, no tragedies. Just a small, real life that moved viewers to tears. For 11 years, Norm didn't change, but the world around him did. Amid the glamour, he sat there, laughing, drinking beer, telling mundane stories. When Cheers ended, Norm remained at his corner, a symbol of America's middle class, simple, resilient, and believing that no matter the chaos outside, this little bar would always open its doors to welcome him back. Cheers wasn't just a sitcom, but a mirror reflecting the American soul for over a decade. The show perfectly blended humour and sadness, drunkenness, and profound, everyday philosophies. Each character carried a piece of real humanity, flawed, lonely, but full of heart. That's why Cheers lives on as an irreplaceable icon of 20th century television. If you love backstage stories behind Hollywood legends, hit like to support us. Don't forget to share and subscribe to our channel to catch more videos about the classic films you've always loved.